Hi, this is Danny Jarabek here with Awards Radar, and I'm delighted to have with me RaMell Ross, writer and director of Nickel Boys. RaMell, thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations on this film. It's an extraordinary, singular experience as an audience member watching it, and I'm so glad to hear a little bit more about the film from you today. So thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, and I'm probably more excited to be talking about the film than you. I promise.
I'm sure. It's like I said, congratulations. I just recently watched you win an award the other night, and so it's very surreal. And I hope it's the first of many for you in the
Mm,
upcoming months. But to start it off, I just want to hear a little bit about your relationship to the source material and
hmm
how you connected with Colson Whitehead's words, and how that kind of lend itself to wanting to turn this into a film.
Yeah, I just glanced at the book a little bit ago because there was some marketing element to we were reading a couple passages, and then we were gonna like put a little video behind it and put it online, and it was so nice to revisit the actual text. I think after I read it, two or three times, I started listening to the audiobook um, to continue to familiarize myself. And yeah, what a literary, just like in terms of prose, like what a lesson in specificity and minimalism, generality. Like it's written so well. Aside from that, I was introduced to the book by Plan B, Jeremy Kleiner and Dee Dee Gardner, and kind of jumped at the opportunity to adapt it. It's as I mentioned, like deeply rich, and I feel like kind of made for me to adapt.
Absolutely. And of course, this film has such an experimental just presentation to it, of course. And I'm sure a lot of this came through your collaboration with Jomo Frey. How did that conversation start, and when did it sort of click with you that this perspective and this point of view was the way that you wanted to do it? And how did you start to develop that with your DP?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate to have like a pretty strong vision of the form of the film and the framing of the images. I Point of view was like the first thing that came to mind after I read the book, and so proceeded to write the script with Jocelyn Barnes. Obviously with point of view in mind, and point of view articulated in every scene. So it's um, the film was written visually before we put language to it. So we made a treatment that was all images, and you have Elwood looks down at his arm, and the gaze coasts up, and it stops on his goosebumps. You know, Camera movement was included in the script early on to give the funders and the readers a clear understanding of the way in which meaning would be made by the order of operation of people looking at things. So with that sort of foundation, and after we get the script approved, is kind of when Jomo came into the process. And then it's really interesting to develop the actual time-based element of it. The the images and the scenes were conceived as oneers, and so we come in and we have to figure out um, pacing. We have to figure out exactly what we're going to shoot on the scenes that we actually have. We have to figure out. We came up with the thrown gaze, which was something that wasn't preconceived, that came up in shot listing, which was a way for us to accentuate the way in which someone's attention happens in a moment, which was a huge breakthrough because if we were to shoot uh, oneers the whole time and something went astray and there's nowhere to cut, you're just doomed, you know? We also developed over the course of the shot listing process the idea of using the snorri cam on the back for the future, and some deep revelations over the course of like putting the idea into practice.
Just from a filmmaking standpoint, the way in which that perspective is told, I've heard you refer to it almost as like a sentient perspective.
Yeah,
Correct me
sentient.
if I'm wrong on that. But what was important about telling it from that perspective, obviously in the way of giving agency to how these characters see the world,
Mm.
in the way that that connects to the power of this material and the tragedy of it as well.
Yeah, you just said it. it's it's the idea that there's something fundamentally. othering that the camera does when it's third person, and there's something fundamentally in the past when we're making those types of films about characters in the past. And with the presentness of the Dozier School for Boys, it closed in 2011. The bodies were exhumed in 2013, and the lives cut short. It seems like one of an important gesture to give actual life to those boys, to give them the cameras, to make the cameras an organ of their bodies, in order to just kind of glimpse maybe what it was like to see from their perspectives, and also, quite literally to like give them life. And that was the operating drive, essentially.
And with your protagonists played just beautifully by Brendan and Ethan,
Mm.
what did you see in them in which you felt that they were right to portray this story when you were, looking for who you wanted to cast in those roles?
Yeah, Ethan has the Elwood optimism. When he's even doing Q&As, he can't hide it. I'd love to see Ethan play a villain. He would like kill you with kindness villain, Stop being nice to me, and he was like dying or something. He in the casting tape, his eyes and his sort of general warmth and his inquisitiveness, I don't think that he's a naive person, but he read as like bright-eyed and sheltered, which is a beautiful thing, especially considering in the character Elwood doesn't have his parents around. He's only raised by his grandmother, and so for a grandmother to instill so much love and security into a young man that he's naive at 18, that is a strong maternal loving figure. Brandon has an enormous chameleon-like ability where and I think that's something Coulson wrote in the book. Brandon, he resembles someone, like if you want him to be X character, he's X character. He can just do it, and he's just already it because he's so present. He can kind of transform, and he was cast first. Yeah, it's so strange to think about the film with anyone else acting. It would be impossible. Like,
I've heard also in other films, oftentimes, when you're working with younger actors, it can be really beneficial for them to have sort of a veteran presence on set as well. And
mm,
I'm curious with Anjanou Ellis Taylor, of course, having that maybe presence on set. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think she's one of the most brilliant actors working today.
mm.
But what was it like having that collaboration with them, and having her on set as well?
Yeah, one of the lovely parts about having Anjanou on, as you're implying or saying, outside of the direct mentorship, is that she just elevates the quality of others acting. Like she calls on other people to be better, and I'm unsure if that means that they weren't already doing their best, and then she draws out a better best, or if there's some other version. But from the first time that she came on set, like we shot very early on the scene in which she comes to Nickel and has to explain to Elwood that the lawyer took the money. And I just remember Ethan and Brandon just like being floored at the kind of force she is, and not as in she's like she has like an invisible globe around her that's moving things like, oh, Anjanou's coming, but the weight of her feeling authentic. Like she genuinely appeared to be Hattie and acted as so. And I think those boys, those young men, just absorbed that energy.
Of course, you have a background in documentary, and this of course isn't documentary. It plays out with narrative attached to it, but I think at times there does come across a bit of that documentary sensibility. There's an archival aspect to the film. So how did you kind of think through that and transitioning from your work in documentary to narrative here, but
Mm.
in some ways maintaining that archival documentary sense to the film as well?
Yeah, it's because we're dealing with history. Uh, although everything's history, as you speak, it is history. The relationship between, like, there's nothing more powerful than images that are of the past, and every image is of the past, you know, and every image implies death. Every image projects to the death of the thing. It's like the nature of photography. You read those images, you look at the Dozier School document and look at those images. There's nothing more powerful than those. Like, what are you gonna make a film that's more powerful than the image of the portrait of a young boy who was taken from his home and we know was killed or disappeared? And so those images had to be in the film because they were the most powerful things. And I think the task was how to have them be in the film in a way that wasn't illustrative. It wasn't like, hey, look at these boys and this happened to them, where it seemed to be integrated into the narrative, justified itself, and elevated the visual language. And that's the fun part. It's interesting to think, I don't make strong distinctions between documentaries and fiction films, aside from the way in which the film would be categorized. Hell County started off as like a sort of art piece, and then I had this really smart fella named Robert Moss, a filmmaker, on the edit team, and he was like, before we keep going, you need to decide whether or not it's going to be, you know, gallery museum, or if it's going to be called a documentary. Now, the piece can be both, but the way that people talk about it and categorize it is what you have to decide. Are you open to this? Are you open to this? And then I realized that documentary has a very specific, it like predisposes you to encounter with truth. I want these images of these boys in the historic South to be in the context of visual truth and for the audience. So I want it to be a documentary. Aside from that, like, I don't care, you know, because images are for images.
Speaking to just the location of this film and the way that you capture both the South and the implications of that, but a very specific setting, a very specific place and time. How did you, navigate that, and how you wanted to both shoot the South, to build your sets, kind of that balance between location and production?
Yeah, we had an amazing production or location department head. I'm unsure if it's location manager but her name was Batu Chandler. And boy, was she a lot of fun and knew every place in Louisiana that could approximate the kind of looks we were looking for each location. We also had this production designer, Nora Mendez, who is a relative guru and has a very similar view to the production of history, which is that it's not unnecessary, but we're not interested in producing sets that feel like they're historical. We would like for the sets to feel like they're as alive as our moment in time now, with, of course, some of the markers and objects of time before. And with that, you're allowed to think about the continuity between then and here in a way that isn't this bizarre separation. It isn't this looking back. It seems to be a little bit more fluid. And these are kind of like the working concepts of a lot of the set design and a lot of the way that the colors and the light are interacting to produce the feeling of place.
And just to wrap it up here, I have one last question for you, and it's just relates to, a little bit of just your career as a filmmaker, but what does it mean for you to be able to share a story of this level of power, to be able to bring Black stories to life in this way to wider audiences? What does that mean for you in the way that you've seen it received?
Yeah, I think even before it being received, it's like kind of the most meaningful thing ever. It genuinely is. Genuinely isn't. It's more than an honor. Like, language definitely falls short here. Where actually I just feel so fortunate and lucky because, the amount of artists out there and filmmakers may be uncountable. Maybe it's under the numbers below the amount of population of the world. But, I think that the sensibility that I have and the opportunities I've been given, and the luck that's, produced whatever sensibility is largely up to larger power structures and larger systems. I think that hard work only gets a person so far. Smart work only gets a person so far. There's so many other elements. So I feel lucky to be able to make these choices and take these risks, and then to have it received well, to me, almost speaks to the need for more people to be given the opportunities I have, you know, because if people like this film, it's like, you know, why I was able to make this is because I was middle class black kid that didn't have to, I could always go home. My dad bought me my camera. I, you know, could call him for money. So I didn't need to have that job. I worked at a restaurant. I did this. I did this. Like my bandwidth was able to incorporate art and dream that art was a career. I know people that are way smarter than me and maybe more creative that don't have the bandwidth to pursue their true dreams because of whatever situations in their life. This is many people in the world. This is the nature of being a human. Everyone has their own struggle, but it seems to me like this could, you know, encourage people to offer more opportunities to folks.
Absolutely agree. And RaMell, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate getting to speak with you about the film. Congratulations again. It's an extraordinary, singular experience,
Thanks,
and I
man.
can't wait to not only see it again, but for more people to watch it and see this story. So thank you for your time. Congratulations and best of luck with everything moving forward.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time and attention.